This is the new Emove RoadRunner Pro. This thing is absolutely nuts. Okay, so a little history on the RoadRunner scooters, because there are actually 3 of them now, and just to get this out of the way, they're seated scooters, not e-bikes, because they don't have pedals. When the prototype RoadRunner base model arrived at ESG 2 years ago, we didn't really know what to think of this thing with the 500 watt motor in the back and 300 watts up front. Then Chuck rode it and he loved it, and I rode it and I loved it. Then we took the production version to CES with us in 2022, and I mean, we had everything there with us. We had the Wolfgang GT, the Dualtron Ultra, the Nami, but the scooter everybody seemed to want to ride was the RoadRunner, which we really didn't expect, especially since we're completely surrounded with e-bikes. So clearly Voro was onto something here. So who makes this thing? Well, it's sold by Voro Motors, and Emove is their in-house brand. So it was actually designed here in California. Okay, so the base model RoadRunner is a 35 mile/hour seated scooter with 33 miles of range that right now is on sale for about $1,400. Like other seated scooters, as soon as it became popular, people immediately started modifying them. So Voro Motors, who are located just 10 miles from Ryan headquarters in Los Angeles, did the ultimate mod and brought out the RoadRunner Tronic, a bonkers fast version of the RoadRunner that uses Ryan controllers. This is the most nervous I've ever been about a top speed run. I rode one and it is fast, but also a lot more expensive at $4,500. So now comes this new version, the $2,900 RoadRunner Pro. It's not as cheap as the base and not as fast as the Tronic, but that doesn't make it the middle child.
Marsha!
To me, what makes this scooter so intriguing is that it hits the sweet spot, or really there are about 5 elements of the scooter that are just the right size, and I'll point out each of them as we go along. If you want to know more about all 3 of them, we've got links to the specs, latest prices, and maybe a coupon code or 2 below in the description of this video. The original RoadRunner has enough power to get you around town quickly, but there's something great about having more than enough. And the Pro definitely does. It's got 2 2,000 watt motors, so that's 4 kilowatts compared with the 800 watts of the original, but it can actually push as many as 6,000 watts of peak power. That's like 9 rental scooters worth. When it comes to price and performance, for the most part, the RoadRunner is similar to other premium dual motor scooters like the Dualtron Victor Luxury or the Wolf Warrior X GT. But when it gets up to top speed, the RoadRunner Pro absolutely leaves them behind. We'll get to exactly how fast it goes in just a minute, but let's find out what it's like to ride first. The upright riding position makes the RoadRunner Pro super comfortable for long rides, but you can turn it into a cafe racer for $0 by just leaving out the spacer or by adjusting the handlebars downward. The seat's been completely redesigned and it's now 20 inches long, so it lets you move around on long rides, and it's way more comfortable than the original. Even the fabric itself is new and designed to stay cool when you park it in the sun. For those of you who have an original RoadRunner, this seat fits on your scooters too and is available as an upgrade. The seat height is just 29 inches, which we think is a sweet spot because almost anybody is going to be able to fit on this thing and have their feet flat on the ground when you stop at a light. The low seat height also makes it more stealthy. In other words, you're going to fly mostly under the radar because sitting still on this, you don't look like somebody who could have just been riding as fast as you were actually just riding. The RoadRunner Pro completes the motorcycle feel with another upgrade, a real motorcycle twist throttle. And check this out, just like a motorcycle, it's connected by a cable to the actual throttle underneath the seat. I love the look and it feels perfect. Between the Pro grade throttle and the dual sine wave motor controllers, it's easy to hold speed steady, even in the most aggressive riding mode. Having as much power as 9 rental scooters might sound intimidating, but even from a stop, the throttle's just easy to use, and if you want it even smoother, you can always drop it into eco mode by holding down the mode button, which switches to only using the rear motor, or use the minus button to drop it into one of the lower speed modes. There are 5 different speed modes ranging from basically walking speed to full boogie, and you can customize them, including sending different amounts of current to the front and back wheels if you want to. During the range test, the thing I absolutely loved about the throttle was, unlike the base model where I used full throttle a lot, like most of the time, doing the same sort of riding on the Pro, you'd almost never hit full throttle. In fact, most of the time your throttle is just right in the middle of the sweet spot. You know, it's like that happy place where the scooter isn't struggling at all and you've just got gobs of power ready to let loose if you want to. There's so many many elements of this scooter that just feel spot on. For example, the 116-pound weight is heavy enough to feel stable at speed, but still light enough where you can load it into an SUV by yourself. The wider 2 3/4 inch by 14-inch diameter tires are another right-sized example. They're big enough to feel super stable at any speed, but small enough to be an advantage when it comes to portability and help to keep the RoadRunner from looking like something that should be wearing a license plate. Many riders are going to absolutely love the 31-inch wide handlebars. For my taste, they are way too wide, but they're also really easy to change. After we film this, I'll probably move the controls inward and cut about 2 inches off of either end of the bars. But you can also swap in just about any handlebars you like because this is a standard mountain bike stem. The Pro suspension gets a huge upgrade from the base model with inverted motorcycle-style forks at the front and hydraulic shocks at the back where there was previously no suspension at all. It feels comfortable even on the worst pavement, and together with the new seat, I felt like I could ride it all day. It's not perfect though. I'd love to see more rebound damping at the front end because at my weight of 165 pounds, I'd occasionally get a clack from the front suspension when it tops out, but that's usually only when I'm riding off of a curb or the backside of a speed bump. Some of you are probably wondering, how does riding a seated scooter like this one compare with riding a regular kick scooter that has a seat added to it? Lots of scooters, including the Emove Cruiser, have that option. Well, we've tried that and it works pretty well, but if you're planning on riding sitting down all the time, purpose-built seated scooters just do it better, and here's why. First, 14-inch wheels like these are way more stable. Second, having your feet set wide on side-mounted foot pegs helps you feel more planted in the seat than when your feet are in front of you on the deck. And then there's a big one. The RoadRunner has a completely different steering angle than all of the kick scooters we've ever tested. Typical scooters are around 13 degrees, and ultra-stable high-speed scooters like the Segway GT2 are 17 or 18 degrees, and the RoadRunner is 24 degrees. The higher the number, the higher the stability. So the engineering is pretty different when you're optimizing for seated riding and adds up to the RoadRunner Pro cornering very well. So what about off-road? To me, the RoadRunner really feels more road focused, but I definitely feel comfortable riding it on trails. Just, don't go crazy off-roading it. This frame with the side panels welded into it is rated for 330-pound riders, and it looks like it could take on just about anything. But the suspension feels like it's designed for, curb-sized jumps, not going full send over a ravine. Now, for one big question that's gonna come up down in the comments, is this thing legal? So we covered that it doesn't have pedals, and it would actually feel kind of silly adding 200 watts of pedal power to a 6 kilowatt beast, but that means it's definitely not an e-bike and puts it squarely in the same not so gray area that Surons occupy. So check your local laws for where you can ride and how fast you can go. You can also check local forums to get people's firsthand accounts about what and where they ride. From the small amount of research that I did, in California it looks like all 3 RoadRunners are outside of the definition of an e-bike or even a moped. That said, I've spent hours riding it all over San Francisco, Berkeley, and Oakland, and my impression is that law enforcement here tends to see the RoadRunner as just another scooter because it just doesn't look big enough to be a motorcycle or even a moped. But if somebody sees you going 55 miles per hour on one, they're probably gonna figure it out, so use good judgment. Let's check out build quality. The color 3.5-inch Tft display is one of the best I've seen and a big change from the simple one on the base model. It's easy to read in sunlight and gives you an almost distracting level of information, including how many watts each of your motors are consuming, and tons of settings that let you tune performance to your taste. It doesn't have an app, but I don't mind that because the interface does everything you need it to do, and it's relatively easy to work with. I'd love to see displays like this one go touchscreen at some point, but that might not be possible because it could get freaked out by the rain. There's a USB port here, but it's probably just for updating the firmware because it definitely won't charge my phone. You've got the typical buttons for headlight and turn signals, and they have indicator lights on them that you can see here, but they're kind of dim in daylight. You also get a motorcycle grade horn, which is great in traffic, but a little too loud to use on a bike path. The new turn signals look pretty cool. You can use them for turning or as hazard lights, but they don't work at the same time as the brake lights, so be sure you let go of the brakes when you're waiting to turn. There's other new stuff too, like this huge, super bright headlight. Some people looks a little too big for the RoadRunner, but I really like it. And this next one is an absolute game changer. On almost every scooter ever made, you have to choose between tubeless tires that are more resistant to getting flats or split rims, which make tire changes easier, but you couldn't get both tubeless and split rims at the same time because how do you bolt 2 halves of a wheel together and make the wheel airtight in the middle? We've heard of something like this from Dualtron, but we've never actually seen it firsthand until now. The RoadRunner Pro has split rims and tubeless tires. It works because there's an O-ring sandwiched between the two halves of the wheels. It's cool stuff and a feature we think a lot of scooters will copy in the next year or two. The RoadRunner doesn't have an official IP rating, and it just says light rain on the spec sheet, but it does have great fender protection. And here's something you don't usually think about. One of the reasons we tell you to stay out of puddles on your scooter is that if the water gets up to here on a regular scooter, it's gonna get into your motor and you're gonna have a problem. If not now, then sometime in the future. But on the RoadRunner, look how high the water would have to be to get into your motors. Now, that doesn't mean go crazy. Still follow the usual guidelines of, keeping it to light rain and stay out of puddles where you can. Performance-wise, the RoadRunner is on par with its peers in every category, but it really shines when it comes to top speed versus price. We had heard that the top speed was 50 to 55 miles per hour, and the Pro came through with an ESG official 54.7 miles per hour in our two-direction speed test. This is a good time to explain why 90% of the scooter speed tests you see on YouTube are completely BS. You see, I actually went 61.3 miles per hour in one direction, but only 48.1 in the other direction because there was a 6.5 mile per hour headwind blowing that day. Two speed runs in opposite directions averaged together is how all world record speed runs are done, because you cancel out the effect of wind and you get a real number. Anyway, so 54.7 miles per hour, that's faster than when we tested the 72 volt Dualtron Storm, and almost 10 miles per hour faster than similarly priced comparison scooters, the Dualtron Victor Luxury and Wolf Warrior XGT. There's no way I'd want to go this fast on an e-bike, but I was clearly very comfortable doing it on the RoadRunner Pro. As always, range depends on how you ride and how hilly your route is. The RoadRunner Pro's claimed range is 50 miles, and I covered 32.3 miles riding hard on our hilly range test course. And that's typical. We usually get about 60% of the maximum range in our test. That's slightly less than the 33 miles we rode on the base model RoadRunner, despite the Pro's much larger battery. But keep in mind, I was riding at a beast scooter pace of 20 to 30 miles per hour with peak speeds of 35. The battery weighs 20.6 pounds and takes 10.4 hours to charge. It's made using premium LG 21700 cells. These are the best battery cells you're gonna see in an electric scooter. You can charge the battery in the scooter or take it out and charge it wherever you want. Better yet, if you have a spare battery, swap it in and just keep riding. Even when set for maximum performance, the RoadRunner Pro's acceleration feels right in the sweet spot. Grabbing a fistful of the throttle launches a scooter with just a touch of front wheel spin. Once you're moving, dual 45 amp sine wave controllers deliver gobs of mid-range power with 30 miles per hour arriving in less than half the time it takes the base model. It also beats both the Victor Luxury and Wolf Warrior XGT to 30 miles per hour. When it comes to hill climbs, larger wheels means it's not quite as quick as the comparison scooters, but it still hit 27 miles per hour by the top of the hill from a standing start, and that's not bad. Stopping power comes from huge 180mm rotors and Zoom fully hydraulic brakes, an upgrade from the semi-hydraulic brakes of the base model. The RoadRunner Pro stops from 15 miles per hour in an impressive 10.4 feet, exactly matching the base model's performance despite weighing almost twice as much. The nice thing about hydraulic brakes is they require much less hand strength for the same stopping power. You can add more stopping power by turning on the regen brakes too. For some reason, these are labeled ABS in the menu. Ours arrived in the off position, so we tested it that way too. It looks relatively small, but how portable is the RoadRunner Pro? With a tested weight of 115.8 pounds or 95.2 pounds without the battery, it's surprising the first time you try to pick it up just how not light this scooter is. And it doesn't fold at all, but despite all that, it's still in somewhat of a sweet spot for portability because it's just small enough to fit in the back of an SUV. And I can load it up myself without even taking the battery out. So that's a big advantage over a Sur-Ron where you're gonna need a pickup truck or a trailer to move it. That said, it's too heavy and awkward to carry upstairs even without the battery, but if you've got a place to lock it up, you can just bring the battery upstairs instead. The RoadRunner has some real advantages in terms of safety. Big wheels means it's more stable. A low center of gravity makes you less likely to put yourself over the handlebars, and believe it or not, faster can sometimes be safer too. There are definitely times where the bike lane is too narrow, and I feel safer flowing with traffic than being squeezed between traffic and parked cars. In terms of theft protection, the higher weight, locking dashboard, and tons of locking points all help keep the scooter safe. Pros include addictive power and intuitive handling that makes it super fun to ride. Performance per dollar is excellent, and riding comfort that made me want to swap in a second battery and just keep riding at the end of the range test. Cons include it's too heavy to carry upstairs, but at least you can bring the battery up. Ambiguous legality in many states. And while I love the suspension 95% of the time, I wish the front had a little more damping. So what else can you get for $3K? Well, we haven't tested a Sur-Ron yet, and they're way more than $3,000. So here are the closest competitors we have tested. The Wolf Warrior XGT is usually closer to $3,000, but currently less expensive than the other comparison scooters at $2,699. This is another scooter I feel like I could ride all day long, and it has 44 miles of range, but it has a top speed that's 9.5 miles per hour slower than the RoadRunner Pro, and the fender needs to be extended if you're gonna ride it in the rain. The Dualtron Victor Luxury has a tested weight that's nearly 40 pounds lighter and 10 more miles of range, but its top speed is also much lower, and its compact size means it's much less stable at high speeds. The RoadRunner Tronic is more expensive, but it's also worth considering if you're looking at the Pro. It has an even higher claimed top speed of 60 miles per hour and acceleration that's just bonkers. Plus, it has a cool Ryan thumb throttle if you're into that sort of thing. But it has a lead time of 4 to 6 weeks, no rear suspension, and don't stay out too late because it has no headlight. So who's the RoadRunner Pro for? Well, if you're looking for a commuter that will get you across town as fast as a motorcycle, you can actually do that with the base model because, you know, it goes 35 miles per hour. But on the base model, you'll find yourself using full throttle a lot, like most of the time. While on the Pro, the whole time, the throttle's pretty much right in the sweet spot. And that is a nice feeling, whether you're commuting, sport riding, or leaving your riding buddies choking on your 55 mile per hour dust. And the whole scooter has a similar in the zone feel pretty much all the time. After spending a week with the RoadRunner Pro, I think it's definitely worth adding one more criteria to your search: seat or no seat. Because the cockpit of this seated scooter is a nice place to be. If you'd like to learn more about it, check out the link to Voro Motors in the description of this video. And while you're heading that way, do us a favor, boop the like button.